Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're speaking with an actor. His credits are many and include The Village, the Grand Budapest Hotel, and this year's The Brutalist. We're pleased to welcome Adrien Brody. Adrien, thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We'd love to start with our normal first question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Is this something you always knew you wanted to do? Did you go down another path? What's your story?
Well, it's been a long road. I began acting at a very young age, about the age of 12 professionally, and it was a relatively fortuitous and random encounter. My mother had an assignment. She's a photographer. Her name is Sylvia Plahi, and she had an assignment to photograph the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City, and they had a program for young people. And she had the intuition and insight to know that I was always an actor and I was always acting, and she saw that what these kids were doing in this classroom setting was very much like what I did at home, and reenacting things I saw and being very curious and animated and imaginative. And the rest is history. She had a friend who was an actress who arranged to have an audition for me and an agent at her agency, and they started sending me out, and I booked work sporadically and somewhat consistently throughout the years, and lived the life of a working actor for many years. I went to drama school. I carried on my studies. I moved to LA at 19 to audition and be available for meetings there, and kind of spent my time back and forth between Los Angeles and New York for many years. And I've been given a few wonderful breaks along the way that have opened new doors, and I've worked with wonderful creative people that have inspired me and believed in me along the way. And I'm very grateful for that.
Did you ever, as my dad would have said, did you ever consider getting a proper job?
I always joke and say it beats working for a living.
Exactly,
and it's great to see you, by the way, Roger. I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you, and you.
I really I'm so impressed by you. There's nothing that I thought could fulfill the yearnings I had creatively once I got started. When I started taking acting lessons and even going out on some auditions, it was so long ago, but I don't recall it feeling like this is going to be a career. But I was reflecting on an earlier film I did. I did a movie when I was 13, maybe just turned 14, and I booked the lead role in a public television movie called Home at Last. And we went off to Nebraska and we shot a wonderful movie based on the journey of many orphaned children who ended up in New York City in the turn of the century, and they were shipped off to Midwestern farm families. And it was such a wonderful experience of we shot in Nebraska, and at the end of the filming, someone was joking around about perhaps this becoming an episodic series. And I was so young, I thought that they were serious. And I remember that feeling of hope that this could go on and never end, because I was just going to go into high school and go to a normal life after this. And it was such an amazing life experience. And in reflecting back on it now, it has carried on. It's just in different characters and different iterations of that. And I just heard from that filmmaker just recently, after many, many years, and it was so lovely, to just to see how long I've been doing what I love and how far I've come from those really humble beginnings, and I'm very grateful.
One of your early roles was in Thin Red Line, and didn't a lot of that end up in the cutting room floor? That must have been devastating.
Yeah, it was pretty upsetting.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to imagine when I look back on that. And I've obviously been asked about that because it is fascinating, and at this point it's Hollywood lore. It's one of those stories of, like,
Really,
numerous people
exactly,
know about it and say, oh, I heard about those circumstances on the Thin Red Line. But when I look back at it, my journey as an actor is to do the work and to embody and represent the struggles of others and their experiences. And that film was based on James Jones's novel, and it was the biggest coup of my life at that point. I mean, getting that role was spectacular. It was a big studio film for Fox, and a wonderful cast of the best actors in the business, and it was the protagonist. It was the character that I was hired to portray and portrayed was essentially James Jones's persona in his novel. And ultimately, parents made a different movie, but they just weren't very communicative about what he intended to do, or it would have been a different story had I known a lot of that. But regardless, I felt great gratitude for that experience. It was humbling in many ways, and it also allowed me to feel connected to, in some ways, the disconnect that soldiers must feel coming home from war and experiencing these profound losses and harrowing emotional experiences, and then how that it must be very hard for people to relate to those and understand that. And in some small way, I felt that this sense of loss of the most important thing creatively in my life at that time, which could have had many repercussions on my career professionally. And I felt like it gave me insight a little bit into their journey and respect for their journey, and that's part of what I aspire to connect to in the work. And so the work was done. I wasn't able to share that with an audience, unfortunately, or
Yeah.
yeah.
You really early on, straight away, really, you worked with some great directors. I mean, Jose Campanella, who went on to do
Yeah.
We love
Juan,
him.
Juan Campanella,
You know,
he's amazing. Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible,
Yeah.
incredible director. Steven Soderbergh, Terry Malick, and then Spike Lee as well on Summer of Sam.
Barry Levinson.
Oh, yeah.
Just reached out recently the other day, which I was so happy to hear from him. Yeah, I mean, it's just so.
Yeah.
I feel very Ken Loach.
Yeah, Ken Loach,
Ken,
all those before you worked with Roman Polanski on The Pianist. What did you take from those early experiences, especially that film Jose Campanella did, The Boy Who Cried Bitch, which is a really edgy movie, isn't it? I mean, it's a very hard movie to watch, actually, but it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in many years, but I so many of these were, I mean, that was really my first role I was still a teenager, but it preceded my big break was getting King of the Hill with Steven Soderbergh when I was 19.
Right.
And that was the first film that people started, I guess, within the industry, and they'd start to know my work a bit, which was pretty miraculous. I remember, even just showing up to auditions, and normally they would call my name and I'd have to say, yeah, that's me, and go into a room, and they would come out and say, Adrien, come on in. And I would always be so surprised that they knew who I was. And I was very grateful to Stephen for that, because people saw that film and respected his work so much. But working with Juan, I was very young. I was still in high school, and I played a kid with all kinds of mental instabilities on medications, and we shot in Creedmoor Mental Institution in Queens, an actual functioning institution. And he's a wonderful director. I remember the sense of freedom I felt, and he was just very inclusive and kind. And the work was good, the work was, I don't know, it had the heart. Like, those two films were pretty much the first foray into filmmaking for me. And my expectation was that every filmmaker would be like that, and that all of these intimate work experiences with a small, tight-knit crew, and arm in arm with the DP and the director in these little spaces, and it's so intimate and beautiful and communal, and I cherish those experiences. I really do. There's something very special, especially on independent films, that aren't afforded time and space and a lot of resources. And so you're all kind of forced to put your hearts and minds together and work at a pace and catch the light and make do if you're not getting it. And it's so special. So those shaped me. And if I'm ever fortunate enough to direct, I have learned so many valuable lessons from the lifetime of working in those circumstances, and learning how to problem solve, and learning all the tricks of the trade, and you learn them through independent film. I remember, I was just thinking about it recently. You remember when they used to have Polaroids, and nobody had a digital camera, obviously, but they'd use Polaroids for continuity shots, and they'd have this giant round key ring, and they'd have a hole puncher, and each department head or makeup person would have a slew of images, and they'd have a few notes written with a Sharpie on the bottom of each Polaroid of scene numbers, etc. It was really wonderful. And you were always getting snapped with Polaroids, and they would have all the cartridges of once the film had been used up, these disposable packs that were being thrown away. And I remember on a wintry day, a crew member showed me how to pop the bottom open, slide out the battery pack, and you put a paper clip or a safety pin on it under the two electrodes, the positive and negative, and you'd short circuit it, and it would heat up the battery and operate as a hand warmer before hand warmers were invented or distributed on these movies. And it was so wonderful. And so I'd go around as a young actor and pry open all these and make hand warmers and keep them and pass them on to my fellow crew members and castmates. And I just remember this, like, you made it work with what you had, and it was so special, even down to those little details.
Did you, or do you deliberately look for those kind of movies? I mean, how do you make your decisions on a movie? Do you look for those special smaller films where it's really about collaboration?
I do. I mean, I think for the most part, I've tried to craft a very independent journey to really work to play a diverse array of characters. And independent cinema offers actors a much more complex range of characters to inhabit. Not to say that there aren't amazing, wonderful roles in studio films, but those are often reserved to the top echelon of my peers. And there are opportunities for great supporting character bits, but the complex protagonists, the ones who are quite flawed and human are often found in independent films. And I've been drawn to that, and also to filmmakers aspiring to tell stories that are quite unique and have been selected by many who I admire. And so I love that independent spirit. But, it's not always up to me. It's not that I have made a conscious decision not to do studio movies. I love, I'd love to get a call from Denis Villeneuve and say, come do a wonderful role in Dune, and I'd be there, and The Dark Knight is another epic, very commercial studio film in a genre that, it was just done with such gravitas and complexity for the characters. And if you have an opportunity like that, that's just an enormous victory, just because you have resources, you have a wonderful filmmaker who understands storytelling and obviously enables actors to reach tremendous performances. And I'd welcome those. Just I can only pursue what my heart is telling me to gravitate towards, but there also have to be the opportunities that present themselves first.
And it's also true that you don't really know all the time what the movie's going to turn out to be, especially if it's larger and there's more opinions in it. You can go into it thinking this is what we're making. I don't know, maybe you've never been on a film like that, but we certainly have. And suddenly it's shifting as you're going along, and it becomes a film slightly different than what you thought it would be.
Well, Thin Red Line was six months of that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So
2 or 24 weeks of thinking I was making one movie. I found out the director made a different one.
We were working on a movie one time, and we were in the bar, and we were talking to two of the main actors, and one of them said to us, he says, I don't get why he's directing it this way. I mean, it's a comedy, right? But it wasn't in our mind or the other actor's mind, but it explained a lot of the performance.
It was very bizarre. We might not mention the movie,
Yeah,
but
right.
it was very bizarre. I mean, the director was making a documentary realism.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness. Someone should have had a conversation with him.
Yeah, really.
Somebody. Tell us about, I suppose it was The Pianist where you really, the Hollywood Times broke through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were so recognized for that movie in so many ways. How did that come about? I mean, and what drew you to that? I mean, it's a pretty hard role, and I believe that it has personal relationships to your own background.
Unfortunately, it's very personal to many people because it was such tremendous
Yeah.
loss in that time in history. Such unimaginable cruelty and horror. It was a huge responsibility for me. I was 27 when I started filming that movie. And I, interestingly, had been working, there were several things that led up to me being in the right place at the right time. One was I had passed on a studio movie that had been offered to me that I didn't really respond to. And I didn't even have work lined up. This was early in my career anyway, and I didn't have work lined up, but I still felt like that wasn't the path I wanted to go on. And then,
Good for you.
well, it turned out to be. And I had accepted this other film, which was Harrison's Flowers, where I played a war photographer. It was a French filmmaker named Elie Chiraki. And I had done that film. And then I was working on Affair of the Necklace, which I had agreed to do. And but I had been offered another movie with a very impressive filmmaker after I had already accepted Harrison's Flowers. And I felt like it wouldn't have been fair of me to pull out of that movie. I'd already committed to it. And I stayed the course. And in shooting Affair of the Necklace, the first AD was very kind and endorsed me to the director and said how right he felt I would be for The Pianist. And I had already done the French film, which was being screened for me at that same time when we were shooting in Paris. So I was able to show them the film, which was a more contemporary war story, but at least gave them something current for them to see me in. And it was remarkable. It was really remarkable. You know, that film really speaks to so much that the world is a better place for movies like that being in existence, and I'm incredibly
Right.
grateful
Absolutely. Yeah.
to be a part of it. It was also, you know, as you know, beautifully shot. Pavel Edelman shot that, and you know, but that kind of storytelling, to get that level of visibility so that the world sees it and shares in it and memorializes this horrific time that we must be mindful of, unsentimentally. It was a real major thing in my life. And obviously, you know, it set the bar very high as well. And I'm really grateful for The Brutalist to come along. I mean, that's a very different story. It touches on similar horrors, and
Yeah.
but it's very much the journey of kind of immigrant story coming to America, and kind of, it's almost symbolically a sequel in a way, because
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
man, it's an artistic person now in America in the aftermath of the Holocaust and all the cruelty and anti-Semitism, and then coming to America as a foreigner and trying to assimilate and still being othered, and contributing greatly with his work, still being treated as an outsider and othered. I think that too is quite relevant.
Did you? I mean, we were very aware of that connection between the two films. Did you look at it like that when you were approached about The Brutalist? Did you see it as a kind of bookend?
It's
And how, what's your process to doing it when you know, once you'd been offered the film? What's your process to approach a film like either The Pianist or The Brutalist?
Yeah. Well, where it requires immersion and understanding and specific technical skill set or familiarity, you just have to buckle down and get as much help as you can to hone in on those details. So in The Pianist, obviously, I've talked about it at great length, but I've had to do a kind of starvation diet. I had to learn how to play Chopin for the way that we intended to shoot certain sequences, and I don't read music, and so, you know, it was quite intensive. There was a great deal of dialect work on that film, but it was more specific dialect work on The Brutalist. Another thing that was very intimate to me is this immigrant struggle, because my mother and my grandparents also fled from Hungary during the revolution in 1956 and emigrated. They were refugees in Vienna for a couple of years until they could get passage to the United States, and then moved to New York in 58. And, you know, my mother struggled a lot as a young girl, but I think her parents, my grandparents, really endured quite a significant sense of loss through that time in history, as well as, you know, World War II. And I wanted to honor that in my portrayal of Laszlo in this film. And I very much remembered my grandfather's very specific dialect. His accent was quite heavy. My grandmother spoke 5 languages, maybe 6, and was able to excel more in America, but it was harder for my grandfather. He spoke English, but it was quite formal, and I found sources to study and Holocaust survivors from that time, but with a very specific dialect that was very reminiscent of my grandfather's. And he was a great man. He wished he tried to be an actor when he was here. He got a role. He got a kind of tertiary role in a Broadway rendition of Zorba the Greek, and he had to dance, and he wasn't a very good dancer.
Oh.
And then he also, the director was giving some direction, and my grandfather piped up and told him how he thought it should be done, and he got fired. And I thought, wow,
right. No.
We're very much alike. My grandfather and I are very opinionated. And
do you like that with directors then? Are you very opinionated?
I have a bit more tact, probably, but I definitely will make a suggestion if I feel like we're missing something. Definitely, I'm not afraid to share an idea, but I do know I do know my place, regardless of my.
Well, you've worked with so many good directors, and they must have different ways of working.
Sure.
What is your most favorite way of working? Because some people plan ahead of time, and some people are more rigid in their plans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very aware that when we were doing The Village together, I mean, I'd worked with M. Night for weeks on doing this storyboard. And usually with a storyboard, you think, well, that's a sort of template, but it can change on the day. But I remember on The Village, M. Night was, no, nothing changes. We're doing it exactly as it was drawn on the page. And, then you work with somebody like a Ken Loach or something, which is kind of much more freeform. And I'm sure a lot of the time you're working with non-actors. How do you navigate that, and what kind of way of approach do you prefer, really?
Well, those were two like polar opposites, with Ken.
Right.
I look. That's the beauty of this. Every time you show up, it's a new experience, and you don't even have to like it. And I think there's something specific to film, not episodic. Now that they're doing so much episodic, it's kind of a very different work approach. But when you make a movie, this is a finite amount of time, and certain things you're going to have to endure, and certain things are an immense pleasure, but the end is in sight. And I think it allows you to pour everything into it and give in to certain things that would be too painful if you felt that this was your employer, for instance, at an office, and this was going to go on for the next 2 decades or so, right? And you can endure it because I try to have fun with that. And sometimes, I'm very respectful to, it is a director's medium, and a creative specificity, even if it conflicts with my preferred work approach, which would be much more malleable and somewhat experimental. I think a great script is essential, but if you are able to work with actors who listen, and you have very creative teams around you, and an operator who is also dances with you, and you shouldn't adhere to one thing, because that's the whole beauty of it. The sun might be peeking around the edge, and you want to start getting around that edge. I'm going to dance with you, and you and I have a 20-second chat in between takes that doesn't even need to be discussed with the director. It could just be like, Adrien, I'm trying to catch you in this light. It looks amazing. If you could just help me get in through there, I know what to do. It doesn't throw me. It doesn't make me feel anything different, other than we're working together and we're communicating and finding a way to make the most magic out of that little moment. And that's the joy of it. So I do like flexibility, but I don't mind. Wes Anderson is very specific, and he has a wonderful, a very unique style that's really his, and is often imitated. And but it is something that I respect and understand. And actually, even if you are asked to work at a certain pace and say dialogue at a certain pace, it has a charm and a uniqueness that you would not deliver on your own. And that is his direction. And you should be able to commit to that. And as long as you can bring some nuance to it, so that it feels truthful, you should be very flexible as an actor. I think some actors feel like you have to trust one another is really the bottom line. And unfortunately, performances can be made and broken in an editing room.
Yeah.
And the trust, it's hard to always trust when you've been butchered in an editing room, but you also have to keep striving to work with people that will honor you and will honor a communication. If you say, I think that this is a bit broad for this moment and I would really love to try this. And they say, sure, just give me one for me to do. If they always are going to use the one for them and completely take away a thoughtfulness that you're trying to bring to the character, then that is hard to deal with in the end. But ultimately, it is the director's vision if you're the actor. And that's why actors strive to direct.
Yeah. It's interesting what you say about Wes Anderson, because I liken, I mean, I don't know him, I've not worked with him, but I liken his approach in a way to Joel and Ethan, because I've never been on a set with Joel and Ethan where an actor has felt that the dialogue didn't work. There's something about the inflection of the dialogue that's always perfect, you know what I mean? And I think the same must be true of Wes Anderson's. It absolutely fits what he as a director is trying to achieve.
Do they give very specific notes? Because I love their work so much.
Well, the funny thing is they don't. I was talking to somebody the other day about this. We always, or they always storyboard. Whether I'm involved or not, or something else. But by the time you go on set, you've got a pretty accurate storyboard of what is going to be shot. But they never show that to the actors, and the actors will block the scene like on any other set in the morning with the crew waiting to see what we're going to shoot, and without giving the actors direction, it will end up that the actors are doing exactly the scene as depicted in the storyboards, and the dialogue is actually, you never change the dialogue. It's very uncanny.
Wow.
And I would kind of be interested how Wes Anderson gets to that point, because as you say, everything he does seems so considered.
Well, Wes has begun to use animatics, and he'll use these moving storyboards, and he will often narrate them as well. So he's essentially performing all the characters, and you have a real sense.
Wow.
And if you've worked with him, you know what he likes and what he doesn't, and you might as well just do what he likes, because you're going to probably do it again until he gets it. So and it's good when everybody's on the same page, because there are all these kind of epic moving master shots and cameras coming on and off of tracks and very complex setups where you all rely on each other to make that scene sing. But he makes it very clear,
You've done so many films with him. Is it like going back to a family again now? Like Asteroid City. Was it like?
Yeah, I mean, the family keeps growing. There are a lot of new children in the family, but it is wonderful to work with him, and he creates a very unique atmosphere both on set and when you come home from work. And similar to what Knight did, those were the only two filmmakers who I've ever worked with who made sure to keep everyone together. For The Village, it was very important because the storytelling was about this utopian society, and so we all lived together in this farmhouse. And I loved it. I really did love that experience. And we ate dinner together, and they were wonderful actors, and just really appreciated that time in my life and what we shared together. Wes does something similar, where there will be dinner back at the hotel. Everyone stays in the same place for the most part, and we all dine together, and just the table gets bigger. Yeah, it's been very interesting. I met a lot of wonderful people through
It's one of
this.
that's one of the advantages to really shooting on location, really, isn't it? That you're all a crew together, like where we've shot in Morocco or Budapest. You're kind of very much aware of everybody around you, not only professionally but socially as well. So, how was it on The Brutalist? Because I read it's a very short schedule. I mean, that's a hell of an
Isn't
achievement
it?
on a very small amount of money
Yeah.
and in such a short time. What was the process on that? I mean, how much prep time did you have? How much rehearsal time did you have? And how much did you have on a time on set to actually, not necessarily ad lib, but to explore the scene like most
Mm,
actors like to do?
We didn't have a lot of flexibility in that sense. We were really up against it. The wonderful thing is that, Brady Corbet is very communicative and very thoughtful with his actors, and everybody feels very included. But I don't recall any real rehearsal prior to us beginning, other than my own work with a dialect coach and working on my own, and obviously having discussions with Brady. But as far as any interaction with any of the other actors prior to shooting, I don't recall any of that. I don't think there was any time for it. And it is kind of miraculous what we were able to shoot. I mean, the pressure was quite enormous for everyone. We were all pretty shattered in making that film, but it lends itself to it.
Did you go in the morning and block the scene out, and having never done that before? In other words, each time you worked on a scene, was it brand new and you didn't know how it was going to be laid out because you didn't have rehearsals before?
I'm sure we discussed certain things that were key moments, but we definitely didn't pre-block. And we would have time to rehearse just enough to work out the blocking on the day. And, they were quite long, intensive scenes. We shot on film, on VistaVision. So those cameras were quite unique and relatively noisy, but they added such a special quality to the look and feel of this film. It really feels like it's from another era. And we all came prepared. I think that's the key. That you have very limited time, and what's at stake, and everybody was connected to their work. I don't remember there being many moments where we were forced to egregiously spend time on a scene because of somebody not being prepared. I think everybody was accountable and knew what was at stake, and very respectful to our limitations. And then Brady made this epic movie, epic yet intimate, and it's really quite special.
Did you talk about the VistaVision and the noise of the camera? I just technical sense. Did you have to do any post sync, or did they manage to record?
So that was my first main concern. I said, this is going to be a disaster because first of all, ADR is great and very useful for enhancing moments. Sometimes you can fix things and make them even better, but to consider consistently revoicing emotional scenes because of some apparatus that you don't have a proper way to shield the noise seems insane to me from a performer's perspective, just because it's very sterile, those ADR, soundstage environments where you're in a room with some cans and trying to cry and laugh and recreate some moment alone with an engineer. And we didn't have to do much. I don't know how they were able to. The sound, I have to give credit to the sound department, because they definitely were quite good. And it was very innovative the way Lowell, our DP, and Brady were shooting those sequences, because they were using VistaVision as handheld at times, and it just was so unusual. I don't think it was typically used in
Were you able to watch dailies during the shoot?
No, I wasn't. I don't particularly like to watch dailies, but I don't even know if Brady would have wanted to welcome me. And I think it's been so long since I've done a movie where they'll have even playback on set. I don't think we even had playback. I think it was an additional person. I don't recall, but I don't think we even had playback. So it's an additional person to be there on set specifically to that. And I think this was a really tight show. So I don't know, but I don't recall there was playback. Maybe there'd be a couple moments that it was necessary, but I have not worked on a movie with playback where actors were invited to come around the monitor and discuss a scene and have time to do that in many years.
Wow.
Yeah. It does really slow the process down too. And I think you get out of the rhythm of the scene if you keep doing
You
that.
run the risk also of people becoming self-conscious. Like I like to not even look in the mirror too much once I'm made up and done and in the zone, because I have an idea of how I look based on how I feel as that character. And then seeing myself, it doesn't always match with how I feel like I look. And I don't think it's helpful to start worrying about how you look and how that may differ from just a sense of freedom of just feeling and being, rather than start analyzing, I don't know, it looks so great in this lighting. It depends on the movie and depends on the character. And certain ones you would want to look, you'd want them to make you look as best as you can. But for the most part, I mean, most of the movies I played in, they're definitely making me much more disheveled. And there's oftentimes that's not the prerequisite.
I'm thinking about Summer of Sam. Your look in that was quite unique. And I would think would be hard for a lot of people to pull off, but you had this naturalness that I completely believed in your character.
Yeah.
So you must not have looked in the mirror on that one.
There's a bit of a jump between that and The Pianist.
It was
as well.
it was only 3 years max. 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing that, because that is so vastly different. So when I do feel that I look the part and very different from and very fit that character, it's easier. I don't mind seeing it, but I don't think there was, I don't recall much playback on that movie either. What I do recall was the hair. I had two key hair looks. One was the Liberty spikes, which were these glued spikes.
Yeah.
And then ultimately the end where they shaved my head and gave me a bleach blonde mohawk. And neither of them allowed me to ever lie down on set or to rest my head in the trailer. So I had to stay upright. Even if I was seated, I could never relax and put my head back, because it would dent and bend in the curve, the spikes. So I could never really relax on that movie. I remember I played a bullfighter in Spain on Manolete. I played one of Spain's greatest bullfighters, and I had to wear these incredibly tight bullfighting pants that the matadors would typically wear for just a few hours for their bullfight, and they were very restrictive, like extremely restrictive, to put it lightly. And you couldn't even sit. You couldn't sit in them. I'd have to I'd have to lie down, kind of like on a plank, to rest in between things. It was unbelievable.
I read what somewhere that you said for you acting is a very painful process. Is that what you mean? I thought you meant something a bit more mentally.
It's
really,
more. I don't know if I said it's painful. I mean, it is painful, but I don't find it painful. I don't carry around a sense that it's a burden. It's a joy to commit. Right. There is pleasure in giving into those moments of discomfort in an effort to faithfully honor or represent something, and knowing that it leads to greater understanding of those circumstances. And enduring it in those limited time periods is somehow weirdly pleasurable, because you you give you give that to it, and I feel it is necessary. I don't do things for the sake of doing them because it sounds good. I do it because I feel that I need to do them, and they're not all always required. And interestingly, it became clear to me on The Brutalist that typically I take home quite a bit of the suffering that the character is experiencing. And I didn't need to do that. I didn't feel it. I was very present and very committed when I was working, but I had anticipated much more personal suffering as a result of the hardships that the character was experiencing. And I somehow would manage to circumvent that, filtering into my personal life on this go around. And that was a breakthrough. I think it comes from having done this for a lifetime, and also having done the work on The Pianist to understand and have the confidence that I have respectfully connected with the circumstances that are in Laszlo's past, and they're something that are still intimate. And I think had I not done all of that work, it would have been a different process now. So it was kind of somehow paying dividends to all of the living. I mean, I think that is what the beauty of being an actor is that all of the things in your life and your experiences in other characters, and both the pleasurable and the unfortunate experiences of loss and longing and creative yearnings, can be applied to a character, and bring truth to that and bring value to the human condition.
Well, what do you think then is the hardest thing for you being an actor? I mean, what do you find the most difficult thing? Well, whether it's celebrity or just the way of working. I mean,
I think it's the waiting for the reliance upon others for creative fulfillment is the biggest burden I've felt as an actor and as an artist. And I began painting. I painted and used to draw as a child, and then for many years I put it down, and then more recently have picked it up. It's served as a much more autonomous, creative form of expression, and it was been quite healing and afforded me distance from taking certain roles, because until I was doing that, I would often work just because I wanted to be immersed in the process, even if I felt, I don't know, this film is interesting. Will it be a perfect film? Will it achieve the level of what I aspire to work on? Probably not, but I would work because I wasn't being presented with another opportunity, and it wasn't merely just to work to support my family. It was to nurture that sense of community and creativity that I rely upon and that I crave to share. And so I think that's the hardest thing, is to wait for it, and that's why many people try to create things on their own, because they and sometimes succeed enormously by doing that, because they're longing for it. I mean, consider how many very talented actors there are in the Screen Actors Guild can't get arrested. It's a very hard life. It's the illusion is that, and it is a privileged life for a few who manage to work and find gain some respect and are able to live a life doing the work that they love. But for most people, it's a really painful journey with a tremendous amount of waiting and creative longing. And that's not something that is that far away from me from my many years kicking around as an actor, as a working actor. And even after having tremendous success, it's still meaningful, profound roles aren't often at your disposal. And you have to be patient and you have to be fortunate for them to come around.
Yeah.
Mm.
Here's difficult question.
As opposed to the others.
Well, no, I mean, it's all very difficult.
I'm kidding.
No, but is it possible to learn to act? I mean, how did you learn to act? Where does it come from? I mean, is this a silly question?
No, it's not a silly question.
You know, to be a cinematographer, a certain level of being a cinematographer, you can learn how to operate a camera and pan a light and spot a light or whatever. But you can't learn it all, not really, not to do what really counts. So the same with an actor. How do you learn?
Well, you can learn to be proficient and you can study, even as a cinematographer, you can study other great cinematographers and learn technique and gain a proper education and be quite successful. But as you can as an actor, somewhat. But you have to have your eye, Roger. You have to have a way of connecting to your soul that sees beyond superficial beauty and perspective and frame and a general, lighting style for the film, but it's something that is uniquely you perceive and that you bring. And that's what makes you special. And that's what makes filmmakers want to hire you. And that goes the same for an actor. You can study and learn techniques and apply yourself. And if you're a good learner and listener and able to somewhat shed your inhibitions, you can work and be good. But to be great, there must be some innate quality that you tap into that is not really describable in technique. Technique is there, at least speaking from my perspective, for the moments where, for whatever reason, I'm struggling to make contact. And then I rely upon certain technique, and I use certain technique to help me make greater contact. So if I'm going to be hungry, and the character is hungry, I'm not going to go gorge on a nice lunch that day and act hungry. Why would I do that? It's a small thing for me to endure a bit of discomfort to connect to that moment and feel it. If I'm, you name it, but it's more about, I think you must have empathy and curiosity to be great. And you must also be able to be vulnerable and uninhibited and maintain a childlike enthusiasm for things, which we shut down in most ways. And as we become adults and our parents and society often suppress that kind of freedom that is necessary to be playful in your spirit. You need to be a vessel to it. You need to be malleable. You need to transform, and all of that has to come from something inside beyond technique. But if you have wonderful material and can absorb great direction, and you have a wonderful cinematographer and you have space to do the work, then you can really shine. But you have to be able to deliver under any of those circumstances. I just did a play. I haven't done a play since I was a very young teenager, professionally. And I just did 8 shows a week in London, and it was pretty terrifying to adapt. And part of the reason I've been longing to do it and have been intimidated in doing it is that it's such a different process from what I've grown so accustomed to doing. I have lots of technique for film acting. I have lots of ways of even self-direction and self-preservation to make sure that I can convey the subtleties and nuances of the characters that I feel are important, whether it's being encouraged or not. It's very hard. You don't have a close-up on the stage. You don't have a lens so close, and you have to make sure it speaks to everyone, and yet you want to keep it intimate and vulnerable and subtle. And so it was fascinating to be up against that, and I really enjoyed the challenge, but it was quite daunting until I actually get on a roll with an audience. I found it very very daunting. It was the kind of communion. My character would speak to the audience, and I would look in the eyes of 50 or so people a night and make contact, and the ones that reciprocated that emotion fueled me and fueled my performance, because there was a human connection. And as I was moving that individual, they were moving me. And the nights that the individuals that were visible in the light on those first few rows that couldn't take the force of that, or were disconnected for some reason, it was much more in a void. And I just loved those. It was very interesting to watch how interactive it was, and those nights of really communing with an audience. It was so moving. I would go home at night and be like, "What an experience!" And it's only, it was at the Dunmar. It was a 270 something seat show a night per performance, and those people witnessed something and shared something, and then that's it. And it was really, really special. But it was a whole new thing to try and refocus and rechannel techniques and things that I have grown accustomed to deliver the work that in a way that I like to expect to deliver it.
You must have some similar. There must be similarity between playing to an audience in a theater and playing to a camera crew. I mean, a crew, a film crew. I mean, or do you, when you're performing acting on a film set,
I don't.
do you kind of dismiss the idea of anybody around you? I mean,
you're in the set.
I've always
It depends.
thought it kind of quite important that the actor has a space they can perform in, and the crew become part of that space. Have to be.
It depends.
Cognizant
It depends. You don't want to. It's a very tricky question, Roger. It is. It is. You don't want to perform for the crew, and you don't want to.
Right.
It's a very different thing. It's because the need to be so specific and intimate with the individual or those circumstances that are you're so moment to moment, and unless you're speaking to a group of people, it's best to not overthink. You do want to have an intimate, supportive relationship, and I think that is necessary between an actor and the crew, and that it's also reciprocated, a mutual respect and understanding for when they need to do their technical work, and allot them the space and respect for what they need to do. And then when you need moments of utter stillness, or people to not move in certain moments, that too is a necessary thing, I think, to create the the intensity of those moments. It feels like it's always magnified. Whenever I'm working in film in a very close, precise moment, I become very hyper aware and hyper conscious of everything else around me. And that was another challenge of doing theater, because you have people milling about and eating packs of crisps and coughing and moving in your eye line and whispering, and yet you have to carry on and carry the whole journey of your character's arc, and many things can go wrong, and that's a whole new set of challenges. But I think the beauty of making film is to be able to create that space where that specificity can be nurtured, and as long as it's not indulgent, it is giving room for some really magical moments that are very quiet and contained yet super powerful, and then those are immortalized. And I think, to your point, you have to be careful. Like, if it's funny, you can't always be hoping that the crew will respond to it. Sometimes they do. And sometimes you'll do something and people are dying as soon as they call cut, and everybody's like, holy shit, I can't believe you just did that, or that happened. And and that's wonderful. And of course, it's very encouraging, but you can't then ham it up because you want to feel a reaction, because certain things need to be much more subtle, that they're not necessarily going to be able to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, good.
What's next? Are you going to direct? I hope you do.
I'd like to. Can I call you if I have something? Will you read my script?
Call me. I'll probably be in my boat fishing. You know what I mean?
Maybe I'll have to make the movie about a guy on a boat fishing, and then I'll get you to get the light reflecting off the water and the close-ups of the fishing line, and something lurking beneath it, just shadow. That's very M. Night Shyamalan.
You've got the basis there. Something great.
So.
Very good. All right, Adrien. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to see you both and
this.
chat with you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm so glad, Brutalist. I'm so glad you're having so much success
Thank
for
you.
it. Well, I'm so glad the film exists, apart from anything else.
I am too. I am. First and foremost, I'm really glad it exists, but I'm grateful to be a part of it.
It's wonderful to see a film that is
about
is about something rather than anything else. Anyway,
Thank God. Thank God.
Yeah, really.
I agree.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you
for your time.
Yeah.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.